On Friday, February 12, 1993, a 25-year-old woman named Denise Bulger, who lived in England in the town of Kirby, went shopping with her brother's girlfriend and took her 2-year-old son James with her. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, they arrived at the New Strand shopping center, where after making a few purchases, they went to a butcher's shop at 3:40 p.m. Since James had made a big mess of the children's clothing store they'd been in earlier, Denise left him outside the store. She hadn't planned on staying long at the store, but things didn't go according to plan. The butcher mixed up the orders, and the woman stayed late. When she came out, she saw that the boy was missing. In half an hour, Denise searched the shopping center, and not finding her son, called the police. Together with the law enforcement officers who arrived, she watched the video recordings from the shopping center's cameras. One of them showed James leaving with 2 boys aged 10 to 11. The police immediately relaxed, and one of them tried to calm the panicked woman with the words, "Don't worry. Well, what can happen? They're just kids. They'll play enough and come back." But he was wrong. James was never found that day or the next. And on February 14th, passers-by noticed a strange doll on the railway tracks. As they got closer, the people were horrified. What looked like a broken mannequin from a distance was the body of a small boy cut in half. Everyone in Liverpool was shocked by what had happened. Law enforcement officers got off their feet, interrogating students who skipped school on the day of the tragedy. The police were constantly called by people who thought they recognized the teenagers from the cameras. And one of these calls made it possible to find the culprits. On February 17th, a woman anonymously reported that one of the boys looked like her neighbor, John Venables. On February 18th, the police went to the Venables home, where they found not only John, but also his friend Robert Thompson. At first, investigators were sure that the boys were not the killers. They thought that someone had persuaded them to take James away from the mall. However, it soon became clear there are no adult maniacs in this story. There are only 2 teenagers who, while wandering around the shop, suddenly decided that the best entertainment is to kill some brat. Both the Thompson and Venables families were not well off. Robert Thompson was born on August 23, 1982, in the family of Robert Sr. and Ann Thompson. Robert was the 5th of 6 children and constantly saw his father beating his mother. The woman in turn snapped at her sons, beating them with a stick and a belt. All 6 boys were left to their own devices. The brothers didn't get along. The older ones beat the younger ones, who in response played dirty surreptitiously. Robert was one of the best off brothers. One of his brothers was a thief, another was an arsonist and was accused of violence, and the 4th threatened teachers. They made Robert look like a good boy, helping his mother around the house and babysitting the youngest child. His teachers didn't think he was particularly smart, but he was quiet and calm, and his classmates just didn't notice him. Robert's only friend was John Venables. John Venables was born on August 20, 1982, to Neil and Susan Venables, who had 4 children. John's parents were reunited then separated, and it couldn't help but affect their 4 children. 2 of them suffered from developmental delay, and if John's sister simply demanded attention, the Venables' eldest son was very aggressive and often attacked the rest of the family. His mother and father were too busy trying to control him, and John found himself without his parents' attention. His brother was an example and an ideal for John. The teenager often copied his fits of rage and believed that it was perfectly normal to humiliate and beat the weak. He often fought with his classmates, and once he almost strangled one of them. In addition, the boy liked to be admired, and Robert was ideally suited for the role of such a fan. Together they skipped school, wandering the streets and shoplifting for fun. February 14th was a normal day for John and Robert. They once again ran away from school and went to have fun in the shopping center. They shoved the old lady on the way and ran away, choking with laughter to her indignant screams. They stole a few bags of sweets, pencils, a package of batteries, a toy soldier. It didn't matter what they stole. The main thing was that the process itself gave them a thrill. Bored friends were sitting in a cafe with cheap ice cream when one of them suddenly suggested, "And let's take some kid away and shove him under the car." Investigators never found out whose idea it was. Both John and Robert blamed each other for the idea. Said and done. In one of the haberdashery stores, Thompson and Venables noticed a woman with a 3-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. While she was picking out a bag, John and Robert tried to lure the children in by snapping the lock of a purse they'd taken from the shelf. The mother, noticing this, called the little ones over, but then got distracted again. It was then that the accomplices took the boy out of the store. Fortunately, the woman noticed that the child was missing and ran to look for him in time. The trio had not yet gone far. Then, realizing that they were noticed, one of the teenagers pushed his son to her with the words, "Go to your mother, that's why you got attached." After their first failed abduction attempt, John and Robert noticed James standing alone outside the butcher shop. No tricks were needed. John just held out his hand to the baby, and the naive and kind boy who trusted all people put his hand in it and went for a walk with new friends. They walked 4 kilometers through the city. Venables and Thompson took turns kicking James, and when he started crying, they rushed to comfort him and said that they were joking and everything was fine. They would soon take him to his mother. During the investigation, it turned out that the company was seen by at least 38 people. Some suspected that something was wrong. The baby's face was covered with bruises and abrasions. The boy did not stop crying. All those who tried to interfere, John and Robert managed to deceive. They told the woman who came to find out what had happened that their little brother had fallen on a walk, hit himself, and now they were taking him home. The motorcyclist who stopped near the Trinity on the bridge lied that they were taking the lost baby to the police. The lady and the dog were convinced that James wasn't crying, but laughing. By that time, they had already decided to pull the hood over the baby's head so that no one could see the signs of fresh beatings. So the young killers brought their victim to a vacant lot near the railway embankment. There they bullied the child for almost an hour. They kicked him, threw stones at him, and covered his face with paint. They pulled off his pants, pulled on his penis. They shoved batteries into his mouth and ass. At the end, a heavy metal bar was thrown over his head, and James stopped moving. Then John and Robert put him on the tracks and ran away. They both hoped that the train would run over the body, and everyone would assume that it was an accident. The teenagers' guilt soon became apparent. On the body of James found traces of their shoes, DNA fragments, and fingerprints that showed who abused the child. The boys didn't give evidence at the trial. The entire charge was based on a 20-hour recording of police interviews. Venables' lawyer later said that John was one of the scariest children he had ever seen, and compared him to the legendary Pied Piper of Gamelin. John and Robert were sentenced to an indefinite prison term with the possibility of release in 10 years. Soon, under public pressure, this figure was increased to 15 years. People were furious because of such a small period. The boys' parents even had to be moved to different parts of the country and issued with new documents under different names due to threats from vigilantes. For John and Robert, special conditions were created. Their cells were equipped like ordinary children's rooms with toys, books, a computer, and a TV. The authorities didn't want to punish the children harshly, hoping to rehabilitate them. This was partially successful. Thompson and Venables began to study better, and by the time they were released, they had received certificates of advanced secondary education. Relatives and friends of the Bulgers took this attitude to the murderers of their son as a mockery. Police have heard rumors that the victims' loved ones swore they would kill Venable and Thompson when they were released. After that, John and Robert were placed under the Witness Protection Program. And for good reason. In the year of their release, several people were injured who turned out to be similar to Venables and Thompson. One of the doppelgangers even burned down the house. Thompson and Venables were released in 2001 when they turned 18. In the spring of 2010, the Justice Department announced that John was back in prison for violating his parole conditions. Which ones, the officials didn't explain, limiting themselves to the wording due to extremely serious charges. Already in the summer, it became known Venables was charged with possession of children's videos that can't be talked about on YouTube. During the investigation, it turned out that he was posing as a 35-year-old married woman from Liverpool named Dawn Smith, who boasted of abusing her 8-year-old daughter. So he was looking for people who were willing to share their own adult video with a like-minded woman. Venables was not present at the trial. The authorities still protected his anonymity. He testified via video link. John was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Ralph and Denise's marriage ended after they lost their son. In 1995, the Bulgers divorced, despite the birth of a child. However, James' father has not forgotten anything and continues to fight what he considers an injustice. At the same time, officials began to find out whether John could be resettled in Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. The Treasury was too expensive to maintain the anonymity of the killer. But the traces of Thompson are lost. After his release, he never came to the attention of the authorities. Rumor has it that he lives somewhere in the northwest of the country with his partner, who knows his history. And what do you think is to blame for this story? Parents, or is it the teenagers themselves who are to blame? Write it in the comments and subscribe to the channel to watch criminal and abnormal stories. Bye everyone.